Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Heffe Chopshop. This is the second video on the Camry engine swap, and behind me is a Honda Accord 6-speed K24. So today is actually day one on the Camry engine swap. So it's super hot still. So what I want to do is get this engine out of here and onto the ground so that I can get rid of the half cut. So I can actually push the Camry further back into the shed, because currently I can only push it back as far as this. So I could just shuffle this over there, but that seems way too easy. So I think what I'll do is take this engine out, take all the wiring off of the engine, or most of it, and just get this down to the minimum. And then we can move all the stuff I don't need out of the way, and all of the stuff I do need, which is the engine and gearbox just for now, we can put that in the front of the Camry and try and mount it all up. I think it's time to go inside for the night. This bolt took me 5 minutes. That one won't come undone, and I just knocked the whole thing off the trolley. So, goodbye. Day two, here we come. Good morning, day two. So, gonna get this thing out, get it on the ground, get this whole front cut and trolley that I don't need out of the way. Probably rip the wiring loom off this thing, and then put it to the side, and then I can roll the Camry back in and I'll have heaps of room. So, let's deal with all that, get it all nice and clean in here, and push the car back in. That was a little trickier than I thought, but it came out reasonably easily. Everything was unbolted from last night anyway, so it's pretty good. So now I'm going to go through and label the loom, take it off, and then we just have the engine, and the exhaust, and the gearbox. So I'll jump into a hyperlapse and get this thing labelled, get that pile of mess off of the back of it. Wiring loom and exhaust are off, so I left the manifold on and just took that little bit of exhaust off with the O2 sensor in it. So that's all off and all labelled, so hopefully it can go back on pretty easily. We've got a large mess over here, the front end of the half cut and also the subframe. So I shouldn't need any of this, but I'm going to put it aside just in case I do. But I've got a bunch of mess over here, so a lot of it is usable. So I've actually cut out the tunnel and kept the base for the shifter, so I can use the Accord shifter in the Camry, or use the Camry shifter with the Accord cables, or whatever combination I need. So you would have seen that in the last episode, but this is where I'm at, and I'll clean all this up, push the car back in, and then we'll start on the middle of the first episode now. This is going to get really confusing for 2 episodes. Okay, I've just finished episode 1, so the manual stuff is all in, the power steering's in, the radiator's in. So now what I'm going to do is tomorrow we can actually start on this episode and get the engine mounted. So I've got all the K24 mounts here and all of the Camry mounts here, and I need to use the car side of those and the engine side of those and to make something happen. So they're going to be fully custom, but I will start with these. At least I can use templates and stuff. So then I was digging through the tools and stuff that I got from Pete and found some of these bushes, and I was like, why would Pete want Magna rear upper control arm outer bushes? And I was like, that's pretty odd. And I dug open the back packet and was having a look, and he's already started making engine mounts. So what I did is got another piece of pipe, cut it down to size. That's going to slide in there, and that will be an engine mount. So we can put a plate on either side of the bolt and mount that to the body or whatever, and then mount this guy in there and mount that to the engine. So it'll be pretty firm, but still rubber mounted. So there's 2 in a packet, which is pretty good. So if this is the correct kit, I will leave this on the screen. If it isn't, I'll put the right number at the top. I need another pair of those. So that's pretty good. At least we can get two started and get them in place. So that's tomorrow's job. But for now, I'm going to go edit the first episode. Welcome to day 3. We have Jackson, we have the engine. Let's make some mounts. So we've got the engine in and the air conditioning compressor hits the subframe. So we don't actually need the front half of the subframe, but we need the strength, so I can move it, which is good. So I'm going to cut that out in just a minute, and then we can move the engine forwards about 50 mil. That'll get us off of the rear engine mount and also get the compressor to fit. And then we can reinforce that later. I'm not too concerned right now because it is bolted to the car, so it shouldn't move too much anyway. But we'll just get chopping, and hopefully we'll have enough room to get that in. We'll see. It's a slight trim. It's covered in grease, by the way.
Oh, it's greasy. Oh, yuck.
Line it back in. We've messed around with this a whole bunch, got the engine back in, got it to where we thought we were pretty happy with it, and then realised that the engine's supposed to be on a huge lean. So we've had to try again. So this is roughly where we want it to be. So the mount on this side should be reasonably easy to accomplish. The exhaust should fit. The rear engine mount's going to be a pain. The front one we need to make a new crossbar, so that'll be easy. We can put that wherever we want and make an engine mount to suit. And then this side over here, we've got these 2 bolts here, and we've got 2 bolts there, or we can go a piece of angle line on here and put some tubes through the chassis rail or whatever we need to do. So it's pretty doable. The engine's about a solid inch under guard height, which we think is probably pretty low in the bonnet, to be honest. And there's plenty of room back here for activities at a later date. We've got about an inch at the front to the radiator. So lunchtime, I reckon. Now back from lunch, we've got the engine in, we've got the front engine mount fully firmly welded, so there's no rubber in there or anything. We're going to remove that later, and we're currently working on the passenger side trying to get an actual rubber mount in there, and then we'll do the driver's side, and then hopefully we can get this engine crane out of here. So we've got the engine in what we think is a good spot. We got it all stood up, got it in there. We're pretty happy with the old clearance, cut out that front crossmember brace, and then realised the engine's supposed to lean over a whole bunch. So we flattened the sump, and then this is where we're at. So we've got a piece of string here. This is going to be our bonnet height. We should have about an inch or 2 of clearance above that. So if we can keep it at that, below that height, we'll have plenty of room. So the sump's pretty level, so the engine's kind of in the right orientation, I hope.
Yeah, we can go back like a full 6 inches.
But that's eating up the turbo room.
The what?
Nothing.
Well, that's what all that room there's for.
All I know is it's going somewhere. So to move the engine back 2 inches, Jackson has cleaned up this gearbox mount, so we're going to bolt that back onto the engine. We can now weld to this, so we'll try and get this in place and then see how we can go getting an engine mount on this side. factory Camry engine mount holes. So I'll drill a hole in both of those, put some bolts through them, and then we can work off of this guy to make mounts to hold the actual bush. So this will be on the engine, on the subframe like that, bolted down, and then this rubber will be sort of here-ish somewhere.
Personal Bunnings.
It's the best. So I'm going to use a hole saw and a piece of metal that I don't have yet, and drill a hole in it, and I can reset this into the piece of metal. I can bolt it to, or weld it to the bottom of the mount on the gearbox. And then I've got two plates which can go on either side of the rubber, and then these can weld to the plate that I made to go on the cross member. So I got a bit sidetracked making progress and got this thing bolted together, so I will clean this all up a whole lot so it doesn't look so janky. But we've got rubber mounted, welded to the original gearbox mount. So I'll bolt this in place and see how it all fits. And there we have it. One roughed out engine mount ready to go. So it's all rubber mounted obviously and nothing's touching, which is really nice. So that's pretty much done for here for now. I could obviously put one back there where the other gearbox mount was, but I probably won't. So I'll just clean this up at some point once we're done and paint it up. But I'll just move on to the other engine mounts for now, get them all in place and working just in case I have to change my mind, and then I'll pull them all out and paint them. Now for the daunting part, letting off the ratchet strap. There's still the crane thing holding it, so this isn't too important, but it was definitely doing something. Removed. Let's redo all of this and get it so it's just hanging off that side. So got the crane rejigged, and now it's just hanging off that one side. The car is still held up off the ground a little bit by the jack because the engine crane doesn't fit underneath. So once that one's done, I can take the jack out and the engine crane out, and this will be a bit wobbly that way, but should be good that way. So front one's going to be a bit of a pain. I've got a mate that's got some roll cage tube, so I'll reinforce that with some roll cage tube, and then I'll have to make this front mount, which should be nice and easy. And then the back one is going to be a nightmare, which I haven't even thought about just yet. And then this driver's side one, conveniently I'd like to go for these two bolts, but they're quite busy at the moment. They're quite busy, so don't know how I'm going to do that just yet, but I need to get something happening here. I'm probably going to go to the rail and put a bolt through the rail or something like that. I have to work that out. So I think what I'll tackle next is this one over here, but I need to work out a different way to hang all of this off of the engine crane. But that sounds like a tomorrow problem. So I'm going to leave it here for tonight. I'm going to clean up and I'll come back out nice and fresh in the morning, everything cleaned up and ready to go on this side. Day 4. So I'm going to start with this engine mount over this side. So I need to re-hold the engine and get this chain and crane out the way, and then I can make a mount. No surprises here, but I just cracked on with it. So we've got the original Honda mount there, which bolts to the engine. We've got a piece of like 8mm or 10mm or something that is welded to the sleeve, then the rubber bush through the whole lot, and then a bolt through the whole lot of that. So this back one is just a piece of angle, and it is going to get bolted to the chassis rail, which I think I'll have to sleeve and weld in a cross tube. And then this front one is currently doing not a whole lot, but I need to make a thing for in here because it doesn't currently reach the rail because this ABS pump's in the way. So I can either cut the ABS pump up a bit and put one of these further down, but then I need a longer angle line, or I can do this and then cut it and weld it later. So I'll deal with that at a later date. So now the engine is affixed and the car is back on the ground. Sweet. It was like a bit over an hour to do this side, and it took most of the day to get the engine in the right spot and do that side. Getting the engine like dialed is the hard part. I think we're about 1 millimeter or 2 wonky, which I can deal with. So now what I'm going to do is take this front one off and get this front mount made up, and then I can revisit that one, or I can do the back. But I'd like to get this one less temporary and sketchy and a bit better. So I'll start looking into that. So it's been about 2 hours, but I looked into the front engine mount, removed that bar down there. This ratchet strap's holding the engine this way. So what I've realized is if I have the original subframe and I take that mount off, which is the original mount, it'll actually fit, which unfortunately I've cut too much out of mine to use it again. So I'm gonna have to go get another one from You Pull It at some point. But I just realized that it won't fit in the crawler because it's actually quite big, and the crawler is the only registered thing I have at the moment. So I moved on to the other engine mounts. This is going to be the front one. So I need to put some bushes through there, which I'm still waiting on. And then I can make the bottom half once I have a new subframe. So this guy just goes on the front there like that. And then I'll be able to put a bolt in that way once I get a crossmember and bushes. Then the back one used to look like this. So as you can see, there's 4 bolt holes that bolted to the engine, and they're all different heights. So what I made instead was this guy. So this just emulates that, but is much smaller and much shorter because this will hit the firewall pretty much. So I need to cut it right back, and because this is aluminium, I can't weld it. So I've got a piece of really thick plate, and that'll do there. So what the plan with this guy is to have 2 bits of angle line come off and bolt the rubber to that, and then I can have similar to this on the crossmember when I get a new one, and that'll be attached to the crossmember down there, rubber bush, and bolt it all together. So I need bushes and I need a crossmember, neither of which I can do right now. So I should probably clean up because I've made an absolute mess. This is already half clean. So I can't do a whole bunch more on the engine mounts until I have a new subframe and the new bushes. So I've got a list here. I'm going to go shopping, get some bolts and some bits of tube and stuff, and get everything I can to continue working on this thing. But I really need a subframe and I really need some magna bushes. So that's a bit of a pain, but it is what it is. So I'll go track all this stuff down and I'll be back shortly. Let's go. Okay, I'm back from the shops. I've probably spent about 3 hours just messing around. So I've ordered all the fuel system, I've ordered all the suspension bushes, I've ordered all the service stuff, and then I've cleaned up these couple bits and pieces of engine mount. So this is the driver's side engine mount. And then if I go over to the car, I've welded in crush tubes. So these still need to get welded from the bottom, but I have welded them in from the top and ground them smooth. So this one is a little bit raised, which is intentional because this is like starts to curve down. So one mount will go there, one mount will go there, and then I need to remake or just clean up this ABS pump. So I'll put that mount back in and get the engine back on it because I dropped it before and it almost went on the floor. There's a fair bit of articulation in the bushes, even though they're quite solid. I don't feel like I'm getting a whole lot done today, but I am getting somewhere. So this engine mount is all cleaned up now. Just needs to get painted at some point, and then I need to clean up the welded section on the rail, weld the bottom. Then this side is actually done. I also need new bolts, which I have to get tomorrow. Then I started on the power steering line and I was hoping I could flare it again myself, but I cannot. So what I'm going to have to do is take this to NZ or whatever and get them to put a flare on there or a new piece and weld it or whatever. I'll just take this in and hopefully they can make something happen, because I can't do it. But it can be a lot shorter, which is why I've cut a fair bit off. When I straightened the old stuff out, there was about this much excess. So that's all gone now, and now I just need a bend like straight on there. So that should be easy because it'll be someone else's problem. Then what else do I need? The rubber lines on the power steering that go to the hard lines are going to have to get extended because the hard lines no longer fit because there's an engine mount in the way. So they're going to have to go, and I'll just replace them with rubber and then mount them to the top of the pump or whatever. Once I work out what's back in here, I can mount something. And then the block offs for here, I'll get them tomorrow. And then the cross member is the big thing, so that's holding me up at the moment. So I'm going to have to hassle someone to lend me a ute or something and pick up a cross member because I can't fit it in the Corolla. So I was having a chin wag to the best Subaru mechanic in the world, Mr. Richo. That is actual fact, about power steering. And he said, why don't you try and use the Honda one? And it bolted on, and the stock Honda hose reaches everything. And I need like half a meter of power steering hose to go in there to there. And that's it, done. So that was easy. And then the back one I still need to get fixed. So I'll go and get that done in the morning, get a flare put on it, get some more bolts, and we're good to go. Which is extra excellent because I get to delete all of this garbage. Oh, and this. So I'll clean all this up and we'll come back out tomorrow, and I'll probably be back from the shops having got all that stuff. It's day 5, I've got tools loaded up. Let's go get this cross member and the power steering line sorted out. I stopped past the power steering joint and they are going to have a look at that and fix it for me today. And then I'm at Aiden's work getting his Nissan Ute. Let's go to U-Pull and get this cross member. Can't say I didn't get up early enough. They're not even open yet. It's 5 to 9. There was a Holden Apollo inside, which I was going to get it out of because it's on concrete, but this one will have to do, and it's on the rubble, but this whole row is cleaned out. There's also another Camry right there. So let's get ripping. I've been here for 25 minutes, been going absolutely ham. Got most of it apart, and then I just pushed this wheel out of the way and soaked myself because I was sitting right there, and now my undies are wet. Great. Well, the cross member's on the ground. Now I'm just gonna get the other stuff off of the cross member. Hour and 15 minutes. It's out. I only dropped it on my leg a little bit. Studs copped my shin on the way down. Whew. Finally home from my trip to U-Pull it and all of the other places. So I'm gonna wash this cross member before I go in the shed, and then I will start on all the other stuff. Don't comment on the lawn. I'll mow that next week. All right, all clean. Cut off that front mount that I don't need. Ground it all smooth enough, so I've got a few bolt holes to work with there, or I can use these 3 over here. So I'll chuck this back in the shed and get to work. First things first, I've got 2 new long bolts for here, so I'll rip those out and put these guys back in. Okay, so I've got the bolt swapped over. That was actually quite hard. The other nut is there because I can't put it on currently. I've put the power steering line on, which goes straight to here, and then I can put the cross member one back on once I've swapped the cross member over. And then I thought I'd bolt up the power steering line to the pump. So this is what I got made this morning. It was quite a lot of money for a fitting, but here we are, and that should hold pressure. So I'll just orientate that once the cross member is swapped, and then I have got another this piece here if I need it, because I don't know if it's going to be long enough or not. So I've got another one. So that's where I'm at so far. What else did I buy? I also got a fuel filter for the Camry. We got a pair of rack boots for Camry, and then the lower subframe rubbers and the rack rubbers, which I've got the sway bar rubbers coming as well, but they'll be here in a day or 2. And I'm still waiting on the other pair of engine mount rubbers. So I'll be back at Sprints tomorrow probably. Got the cross member, it's all cleaned up now. I've ground that piece off, so I can probably start trying to swap that over, which is going to be a big job, and I don't really want to do it again. I've already done it once this morning. So I'm going to swap this cross member. I may as well jack the car up, take the wheels off, get the drive shafts out, which are already out actually. Then the rack has to come off and the sway bar has to come off. So while I'm in there, I'm just going to do all the bushes as well, and I'll just get cracking and try and get it back together with the new cross member, which is exactly the same as the factory one, just without this whole big chunk cut out, just that front mount. So let's just get into it. So the cross member is fully unbolted and it's still sort of hanging there. Give it some persuasion, I reckon. Got it in. Chopped cross member out. It's also very greasy, and the new one ready to go back in. So since being under the car, I've noticed that this bit is not necessary for what I want to do, and it also will be clearance for the exhaust. So I'm going to cut probably about here and then along here, take off that little bit of that corner. So on this one, it would be just sort of that section there, because it's all nice and strong underneath. I'll leave all the strength and just take out this bit of plate on top. because the exhaust sits right about there. So any clearance would be good. So let's get this out of the way. Chop that little bit off the new one and put it back in. Okay, that's chopped up. So I left all the structure there, just took the piece of tin off. Front mount is removed, so I'll just give these a quick coat of black and then get it back in the car. Whew. Well, that was a full bit of misery. So cross members back in, bolted in properly. The steering is bolted in properly, which is what I was fighting with for so long. And then I've also hooked up all of the power steering. So we got the res here from the Honda, goes through the cooler and then down to the rack. And then the rack is all plumbed up with that new fitting. Goes through the rack, back in through the new fitting, and then into this top line, into the pump, back down into the res. So the power steering is all sorted, which is excellent. The fuel system has been ordered and is on its way. The shifter works. So we're getting there. It's just one thing after another, really. So I need to clean up the other engine mount on that side and get that bolted in for good. And then I need to also paint this one, which I need to pull it out for. But I want to make a new engine mount for the front first, which I need the bushes for. So this piece I made actually clears by about 1 centimeter, which is perfect. And the aircon now fits by about 1 centimeter as well. So that couldn't really be better, which is quite nice. So I can do 2 L brackets over here and just bolt it straight down to the cross member, which is pretty sweet. Then the back one, still going to be a pain. The cut that I made gave me a little bit more room for the exhaust, but it's still not a heap. And then the engine mount is in there with all of those hoses and shifter cables. I'm getting there, but it is kicking my bum today. Okay, another bit of work has happened. So, engine mount's not painted. I'm not going to bother for right now anyway. That's done, bolted in for good. Power steering's done, good. Shifter, I've actually hooked it up to the gearbox, and it is the shortest shifter ever. Like, it's super notchy, which is really nice. So hopefully that's not too short and not annoying. We'll see. Then the engine mount under this side is all finished off. So again, not going to paint it, but it is all ground back and rounded and stuff. So not going to paint it for now. I'll deal with that later. Then I've also hooked up the clutch line. So down there, it bolts to the top of the rack. And then I've made the Honda hardline work with the Toyota Master. So that's working. The heater hoses can be plumbed up, but I need a fitting and some more hose. The breather can get hooked up, but I need to get some more hose, and same with the booster. So that's pretty much everything on this side of the engine done. Rear engine mount, front engine mount, really waiting on those bushes. We'll see how they go. I just looked into the aircon, which wasn't a priority, but I may as well look at it while I'm here, and I think I'll be able to make good with what I've got. So I've got the Honda stuff and the Camry stuff, and I should be able to make one out of the two. So hopefully that'll work. I've also put the airbox in and should be able to make a pipe from the airbox to the engine. So that is another job for later, because at the moment it's just going to get a pod filter because I don't have time. I have a week, but I'm still just trying to hustle and get this thing done. That's pretty much where I'm at. So I've got this list over here. So you've got weld the driver's side mount, which is those cross tubes that go through the chassis rail. AC lines, if I can get around to it. Brake booster hose, which I talked about. Purge for the fuel lines, which I talked about. The heater hose, done. Drive shafts, I need to get onto that pretty soon. They're going to go in the lathe, and I'm just going to cut and weld, which is going to be a bit sketch, but we'll see how they go. And if I need to get custom ones, I'll get custom ones. Exhaust is super tight. I'm just going to have to deal with it and make it happen. I'm not really sure how to do it. Service the engine, that's pretty easy. Fuel system, waiting on parts, which should be here very soon. Bleed the clutch, can't do that by myself. Intake, I just spoke about. Engine mounts, I just spoke about. Lower control arm bushes. So I've ordered lower control arm bushes, and I have the lower control arms here. So I just need to replace those bushes and put them back in. Pretty easy. Rack bush on this side. So it was hard to get out, and you need to take the rack end off. So I'm going to have to deal with that when I do the boots, which brings me to the boots. Need to do those, and sway bar bushes I'm still waiting on. That was a mouthful. So I think that's about all I can do for right this second. Tomorrow morning I'll come out and try and start on that list again. See how we go. First I'll show you the shifter. So I got the shifter here in the Camry. So the shifter itself is Camry. The cables are Honda and the engine is Honda. And if I go to first, it's there, second, third's there, fourth, fifth, sixth, reverse. So that's pretty cool and super tight and direct. I'm really keen to drive with that. Good morning. So it's day 6 on the Camry here. So I'm going to start off today. I've cleaned off the floor and the benches and stuff, and then immediately cover them in stuff again. So I'm going to do bushes in these lower control arms, get those finished off, bolted back in the car, and then I can do the rack bush on the other side and the rack boots as well. Just try and get the whole front suspension back together and ready to go back on the ground, because I am running out of parts, and until they get here I can't do a whole lot. So I'll bust out these bushes and get the car back ready to go on the ground. So here's what we're working with. This is the original lower control arm. So this bush is the original one, or original style. It needs to get pushed out. You can see it's starting to crack, and it also has these grooves in it, which is for MVH and stuff, like noise harshness, whatever it's called. So I've got these Super Pro bushes. So this is the part number over here for anyone playing at home. So these guys are going to go in there, and then a tube in the middle, and then this pin here needs to get pushed out and replaced with this bush here. So it should be pretty simple. There's another little part there. That part number is that one. So it should be pretty simple. I'll just cut it to it being done. Ready? Well, took a little longer than expected, but we're back together. So the bottom one I did mostly on the bench, and the top one I did in the press. So I'll chuck this back in the car and we'll do the other side. Okay, so I've gotten stuck in, got the lower control arm bushes swapped over on one of the sides. This is the passenger side, so just push this one out. It's all ready to go back together. So we'll take that one out, obviously. This side's all back together other than the sway bar bush and the steering. So I've replaced the rack end bushes and stuff in there, and the rack bush. And then coming over to this side, I've replaced the rack bush and the boot. The rack bush was a nightmare. I just had a really bad time with it. But it's done now. So I need to swap those bushes for this lower control arm, and it can go back together. In saying that, I just got a call from Sprints, and they said that the Magna bushes are here, so the ones for the engine mounts. So I'm going to go down and get those, get some lunch, and then I'll come back, finish off the lower control arms, and then I can get these engine mounts done. Then Richard will be here, and we can do the wiring, which will be next week's episode. So back from the shop, coffee, engine mount bushes. Excellent. So I'll finish off this other suspension, and then I will get into making the rest of the engine mounts, and that'll be it for today's episode. This side's all done, finally. Engine mount time. Let's do this. This front engine mount's coming together really nicely. So I've got 2 bits of angle all drilled and cut, and then I've drilled some big holes in here to put some crush tubes in. So I figured I'd take a second and show you what a crush tube is. So this is the bolt that's going to be holding the engine mount in. This is the cross member. You can see here it's not very flat, and it's also not very flat at the top, and it's also quite thin metal. I mean, this in this instance isn't that thin, but for the example. So you put this piece of tube here through the whole lot, weld it at the bottom, weld it at the top, take the bolt out, grind it all nice and smooth, and then you've got a nice flat surface up here, a flat surface down here, and you can't actually crush the cross member. So that's why it's a crush tube. So plan is now that's all ready to go. We'll just tack here, take this bolt out, cut it nice and square, and do the same at the top. I think the top's pretty good. Then fully weld it, top and bottom, and then grind it all smooth, put the bolt back in, and pretty much we're done. So I need to clean up those L brackets as well. And then I've got to do the same thing just here. So I'll cut to that in just a moment when we're all done. There we go, 2 crush tubes welded in. One is apparently really wonky, but I don't care. So it needs some shorter bolts and some nylocks, and then they can go together properly. So now I'll pull that top L brackets off and clean them up, and this front guy's done. So welded the bottom, now I need to weld the top. So I'll just weld around here, grind them nice and flat, and then run a drill through it and just make sure it's nice and round so I can get the bolt in, and then we need to move on to the engine mount. Couple of quick boogers on there, let's grind them down. Remember kids, grinder and paint makes you the welder you ain't. Let's grind this engine mount down and get it in. Far too long with an angle grinder, that's all nice and cleaned up. Just chuck it in the car. So there we have it, front engine mount bolted in, crush tubes welded in, everything's good to go there. I also have to weld and grind back the crush tubes on that side, but I'll do that off the camera because I have to end this episode here. So thank you very much for watching this huge episode. I've been working my bum off to try and get this thing done. So hopefully next episode will be wiring and finishing off the engine bay, and then there might be another one later, probably towards the end of the year, of us driving it, putting it on the dyno, all that sort of stuff, testing it out. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. See you next week.